epidemic of, and an epidemic is the right word. It's truly an epidemic of violence in some of these communities, and they need to get these guns off of the street. And what's better, to have more dead children, or to be a bit aggressive, I guess I would say, in the police trying to get these guns off the street.
Okay, a couple of things, and I'm glad you raised these points. First of all, the statistics you cited about the number of murders and the fact that the majority of people who are murdered in the research that you conducted, the overwhelming majority of the majority of these persons were people of color, and the majority of the perpetrators and the victim of the perpetrators, if I understand you correctly, were also people of color, and you also found in the course of your research that the level of violence that reflects is disproportionate when you consider the percentage of persons who are of color in the general population. And this is a point that has often been made, and but let me ask you this, though. Whether that rises to the level of an epidemic is a whole other thing. One can make the argument that in order for you to describe this as an epidemic, you would have to express the total number of such persons who are killed, and as a percentage of the total number of the general population of those persons. In other words, your universe against which you are making the comparison has to be a universe that is confined to people of color. You can't just pick a number or pick a figure and say that the mere fact that this figure, that 92% of all of the black people who have been murdered by other black people, that means that there's an epidemic of violence, because the total number of people who have been murdered who are black may constitute a relatively small, and I'm sure that they do constitute a relatively, and in fact very very small percentage of the total population of black persons, which is not to excuse any of this, mind you. I'm just saying that as to be intellectually fair, you have to make the correct comparisons.
But can I just add something?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Proportionally speaking.
Yes.
I mean, thank God, most people. Thank God most people don't get murdered.
Right.
And thank God most people are not murderers. But,
yes.
But proportionally speaking, if you compare it to, let's say, the Chinese community or the I don't know, the Russian community,
mm-hmm.
or whatnot, there is a higher percentage of murder victims and of perpetrators.
And the question, yes, and the question, okay, a couple of things on that. First of all, making these kinds of comparisons is always a very dangerous thing, because once you begin to compare populations of people and entire communities of people, then you have to take into consideration all kinds of other factors that we don't want to get into right now, including the size of the population, where these people live, who these people are, what their history in this country has been, and that sort of thing. It becomes a much more complicated comparison than it might appear to be on its face. But the point I want to make to you is this. The fact that there is a problem means that as a society we ought to be concerned about finding a solution. The question here is whether the practice of stop and frisk as it is currently conducted is the appropriate response to that problem. And for example, the New York Civil Liberties Union did an analysis of stop and frisk. Here's what they found, that last year police found weapons of all of the people who were stopped. Bear in mind that blacks and Latinos comprise more than 80% of the people who have been stopped. Okay? You got that?
Yes, I do.
We can agree on that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a percentage that is way out of proportion to their numbers in the general population. The number of whites who are stopped is way below their percentage in the general population. But according to the New York Civil Liberties Union, last year, police found weapons on 1.8% of the blacks and Latinos who were stopped, as compared to 3.8% of the whites who were stopped. What does that tell you? It tells you that the police are stopping a much smaller percentage of the white population relative to their total numbers, but they are finding more guns on the whites who they stop than on the blacks who they stop. Now, what do you want to do with that information? What does that tell you, and how does that fit into your thesis?
Well, I think that's an interesting point. It's an anomaly. I don't quite understand.
Oh, an anomaly, you call it?
Well, I mean, I don't understand it, because if I'm driving through Forest Hills, Queens, if I'm in Forest Hills, Queens at 11 o'clock at night, or I'm in East New York, I grew up in New York my whole life, I know there's a difference in the level of dangerousness and the amount of guns out on the street. And I mean, that is some sort of an anomaly. I like to see the verification of that, but just,
now you want to see the verification. Well, you can go to, just check out the New York Civil Liberties Union website. If you think they're lying, I'm sure that they would be more than happy to.
Let's just be honest. Is it safer to walk around in, let's say, Forest Hills, Queens, or in East New York at 11
Now, I would imagine that depends on a number of factors, and the question here is not one of perception. And whether you perceive yourself to be safer walking around in Forest Hills than in East New York. If you prefer to walk around in Forest Hills, you're welcome to do so. The question is, when you're walking around in Forest Hills, do you believe that you have a constitutional right, to enjoy the liberty of being able to walk around wherever it is, whether in Forest Hills or in East New York, without being arbitrarily stopped and in many cases accosted in an impolite and unprofessional manner by the police, to be made to empty your pockets without any apparent reason, in obvious violation of your Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable search and seizure. The question here is this: how can you conduct a program, as the first caller said? This is a tool. Stop and Frisk is a tool. Nobody is saying that it has to be banned. What people are saying is that as a tool, it clearly has not worked in the way that it is being presented or represented by the police and the mayor, because we now have stopped nearly 700,000 people in 1 year. This is an increase of several 100% over the number of people who were stopped when the program began. But the total number of people who are ticketed for any reason whatsoever is pretty much the same. So what does that tell you? It tells you that you're obviously carrying out a blanket campaign that is not yielding any proportional or proportionate benefit. And when you consider what the other gentleman, the retired police officer, said, that this thing has now become subject to a quota, then and is now part of a quota system, can you see how that would be unreasonable?
Yes, and I honestly agree with you, and I agree with the gentleman who called, and I don't like it when it's carried out disrespectfully or arbitrary. It's wrong, but all I'm trying to say is, at the same time, there is this. You don't want to call it an epidemic. I don't know what to call it, but there's a high level of violence and guns, and I just feel it's frustrating to me, because I feel like people are not addressing that, and it's just upsetting, because you have so many people getting killed unnecessarily.
Okay, and our hearts go out to people. Understand this. I think part of the frustration that you're experiencing is this: nobody is denying that there is an unacceptable level of violence out there, regardless of where you are, and that far too many people, young people, innocent people, are losing their lives to violence, to guns, being caught in crossfire. I mean, far too many people, and every life that is lost in this way is a terrible tragedy. Everyone agrees on that. That is not up for debate. The thing that is up for debate is whether a system of large-scale racial profiling in which Black and Latino, predominantly young men of color, are being arbitrarily stopped, accosted in the street, and practically assaulted by the police in order to satisfy a quota, and this is happening at will, and it creates a climate it creates, quite frankly, a climate of occupation in the communities where these people live. And the fact is that because we live in a society that is largely segregated, and that segregation is itself a byproduct of our history, what it means then is that this kind of practice, when it takes place in a given neighborhood or community, is being carried out primarily by individuals who do not belong to that community, who have no history in the community, and it quite frankly generates a tremendous amount of resentment. But look, I appreciate your call, and I thank you very much for making